Hello, everyone. At Hank, I'm Greg. I'm joined by Catherine, and you may have already seen Catherine's previous film, and we focused much more on what's going potentially wrong with modern parenting techniques. There's a lot going right. It's not all bad, but and we talked about that in depth. But this film's more about what Catherine can do or what she recommends to solve some of those issues that we're seeing at the moment. So, Catherine, you go to people all over the world and you help and recommend, and you sort of, I think you kind of take a step back and look at the big wider picture.
Yes.
What solutions do you generally see that you're recommending?
It's not, so I really try and stay away from top tips because actually I find that ends up with firefighting, and firefighting techniques look like kind of bribery and reward charts, which need to be stay away from them. They're not going to help you. They're going to fracture your dynamic further. And I tend to find that actually it's quite often my job to go in and give parents an understanding of what's going on. You're absolutely right. If you're stood with your nose to a poster, you can't see the whole picture. So my job is to take a step back, say this is actually what's going on.
Because you're a third party in the family observing.
I tend to grey rock myself. I pretend I'm not there. I make myself as boring as possible. The children think I'm incredibly boring.
Okay.
I'm no fun at all. And I see my job quite often as giving parents the confidence to be the boss all the time, not just when they need to be, to kind of take back control consistently, so they're not kind of going from perhaps being a bit too nice to losing the plot and then switching back to being a bit too nice because they feel bad about it.
So the child has that consistency of outcome.
Always having that consistency, whether they're being an angel or a demon, the parent should be consistent rather than the child having control with how they choose to behave.
Okay. And you maybe on one side you've got fractious, tired parents, and then you've got a child who's a not fully formed human.
Yeah.
So
indeed.
So let's find the middle.
Absolutely. Finding balance.
Consistent balance.
Taking control consistently across the board, no matter what's going on. And also sometimes giving them permission to take that harder line, which isn't particularly popular in our society right now.
Old
but it's
school.
actually so important. A bit of old school. We don't have to go completely back to how it was, but a bit of old school is important. We've lost that completely, and actually there were some good things from back then.
So a few older parents have mentioned to me that the trend is to be your child's mate.
Yes.
And you're
I
not.
always say they're going to have loads of friends in their life. They only have two parents. If they're lucky, sometimes they just have one. It's a really important job. Don't try and be friends with them. Sometimes you have to take that harder line. Your job is to teach, nurture and guide them.
Yeah.
And if you're busy trying to keep them happy, pleasing and appeasing them, you can't do that.
Okay. Fine. Yeah, it's a good line. You're going to have lots of friends that you've only got one parent.
They're going to have loads of friends in their life, and that's okay. The friends will be friends, but they only have two parents, and at some point you will not be there for them, and you need to give them the tools to survive on their own.
Yeah.
Whereas we end up with a lot of unhealthy codependent relationships, which again fracture the parent-child dynamic. Discipline's an interesting one as well. I get asked a lot about top tips on discipline. And I will say discipline isn't about punishment. We quite often see it as that, like, you've done something bad, so I'm going to discipline you. Actually, discipline is in every action. So if you think of it for an adult, it's doing well in a career, it's training for a marathon. For children, it's the same. It's getting up, it's getting dressed, it's making your bed, it's clearing your plate, it's eating that food that mum's made for you, even though it's not your favourite meal, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Maybe it's your sibling's favourite meal, or maybe mum wants you to eat it because she knows that you're a bit deficient in whatever. Parents need to make the decisions. That's why children have parents. So discipline's in every action rather than it being about punishment, which is why I think we've got, I don't want to discipline my child. Actually, it's something you should be instilling in them from a young age and for them to thrive in their own right.
So about kind of guidance.
It's about, discipline. Guidance. Yeah, it's about guidance, about them teaching them that you might not want to make your bed.
Okay.
But I'm asking you to as your parent, and you should trust me enough that I'm helping you to make the decisions. We quite often will over-explain a lot. And quite often children only take in a few words anyway. If you're over-explaining things to them, they shut off. Quite often you just have to... Well, when I talk about over-explaining, I say that if you have to explain absolutely everything to your child and they're always pushing back and saying why, quite often, especially when you have younger children, sometimes you can't explain why because they won't understand it, or because it's dangerous, or you just need them to do it now for whatever reason. Okay. And if you're constantly explaining yourself and that there's a habit then built that they always need an explanation, it actually stops you from doing your job. It's okay for children to not understand everything. Okay. They need to just trust their parents.
Yeah. It does seem to be a theme. I'm conscious we don't go on, but schools seem to place a lot of importance on the child being the fullest version of themselves, and that's a very modern trend, and it sounds very good. I'm sure most people support that. Yeah. But you're sort of saying actually there's a bit of a we need to perhaps pull back a bit on that, and there's a bit of there's a system to fit within.
Absolutely, it's how you go about that. I'm all for that. Okay. I'm all for children becoming the best people that they can be for themselves.
Yeah.
But actually, if we go about that by making it all about them and sorting out their issues for them, and again trying to keep them happy, we're actually taking that away from them.
Okay. It's weird that pursuit of happiness ends up not.
Absolutely, it's not about happiness. Happiness is a byproduct. It's not the goal.
Lovely. Good. Okay. Any other solutions-based things you do? Or maybe if you go into a family, how long does it take you to see change? Or do you leave them with some top tips?
$1 million question. So, no, it's not about top tips. It's about dealing with the root cause, which is fixing the parent-child dynamic and building a bit of trust, which is way too much to go into on here. I'll bore everyone silly. But I tend to find the first 2 weeks the hardest. Ultimately, it's rooted in habit, the parents' habits first.
Yeah.
The pitfalls they've fallen into just trying to get through the day, and they've ended up firefighting. They're held to ransom with behaviour, treading on eggshells. So once I go in there and help them to understand why it is the way it is and what they need to do about it to fix it for the long term, I normally say the first 2 weeks are the hardest, but then it takes a good month or two to see lasting effect, which is a child that's calm and engaged, not constantly fighting back. And that's why the process always starts with a 3-day visit, and then I'm on the end of the phone or email or WhatsApp, or however we decide to keep in touch, for as long as needed ongoing. There's no expiration date. My job is to find a long-term fix, not a firefighting fix, which exhausts both parent and child.